The ghost. Some say that monsters cannot feel. But that night, standing under a flickering streetlight in the rain, the most feared man in the city felt his cold heart crack in two. Viktor Morozov had built an empire from nothing. In the underground world of organized crime, his name was spoken in whispers. They called him the Ghost, not because he was invisible, but because those who crossed him seemed to disappear without a trace. Rivals, traitors, anyone who threatened his domain. They all learned that Viktor's silence was far more dangerous than any man's rage. At 38 years old, Viktor controlled half the city's underground operations. Import routes, protection networks, gambling establishments, construction contracts, all of it flowed through his hands. His word was law. His anger was death. But none of this brought him peace. Every night, Viktor returned to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights. It was a place designed for a king, marble floors, expensive art, furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. But inside those walls, Viktor felt only the echo of his own footsteps. He ate alone. He drank alone. He watched the city sleep alone. This was the life he had built. This was the price he had paid. Viktor's rise to power had begun in blood and poverty. His father was a low-level enforcer who died in a gang dispute when Viktor was only 11. His mother followed 2 years later, worn down by grief and sickness. By 15, Viktor was sleeping in abandoned buildings, stealing bread from market stalls, fighting other boys for scraps of food. The criminal world found him before he found it. An old boss named Sergei saw something in the young Viktor. A coldness, a calculating mind, a willingness to do what others could not. Sergei took him. One of Viktor's enemies sent a message, not to Viktor, but to Elena. Photographs arrived at her apartment. Bodies, destroyed lives, evidence of everything Viktor had done and would continue to do. The night she confronted him, Viktor saw the look in her eyes change forever. "Is this who you are?" she had whispered, holding the photographs in trembling hands. "Is this the man I've been loving?" Viktor could have lied. He could have denied everything, manufactured explanations, used his silver tongue to twist her back toward him. He had done it to others countless times. But he could not do it to her. "Yes," he had said quietly. "This is who I am." Elena left that night. Viktor did not stop her. He told himself it was mercy, that he was protecting her from his world, that she deserved better than a monster's love. But in the years that followed, as he climbed higher and became colder, Viktor understood the truth. He had let her go because he was afraid that if he held on, he would have to change. And monsters do not change. The red light. 7 years passed. Viktor became richer, more powerful, more feared, and more empty. His days blurred together in an endless cycle of meetings, negotiations, and quiet threats. His nights were spent in expensive restaurants where everyone smiled but no one spoke truthfully. Women came and went from his life like shadows, beautiful, disposable, meaningless. None of them saw him the way Elena had. None of them believed in a good man hiding inside. Then came that night in October. Viktor was returning from a meeting at 2 in the morning. His driver, Pavel, navigated the empty streets while 2 of Viktor's advisors discussed business in low voices. Viktor sat in the back seat of the black Mercedes, staring out the window at nothing in particular. The car stopped at a red light. Viktor's eyes drifted to the roadside, and suddenly, everything changed. A woman was standing beneath a bus stop shelter, holding a small child in her arms. The woman's shoulders were shaking. Even from a distance, even through the rain-streaked window, Viktor could see the tears on her face. Something about her felt familiar. Stop the car, Victor said quietly. Pavel glanced in the rearview mirror. Sir, the light is about to change. I said stop the car. The driver pulled to the curb without another word. Victor's advisors exchanged confused looks as their boss opened the door and stepped out into the cold rain. He walked slowly toward the bus shelter, his expensive coat darkening with moisture, his eyes fixed on the crying woman. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was too focused on the child, a little girl, perhaps 5 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. The girl was pressed against her mother's chest, shivering, her small arms wrapped around the woman's neck. Victor stopped 10 feet away. Elena, he said softly. The woman's head snapped up, and there she was, older now, thinner, dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry, but still beautiful, still the only woman who had ever made Victor Morozov feel like a human being. Elena's expression cycled through shock, fear, and something that might have been hope. Victor, she breathed. What are you doing here? He didn't answer. His eyes had drifted down to the child in her arms. The little girl was looking at him. Her face was wet with tears and rain, her lower lip trembling with cold. But it was her eyes that made Victor's heart stop beating. Gray eyes. His mother's eyes. His eyes. The world seemed to tilt beneath Victor's feet. He reached out and steadied himself against the bus shelter pole, his breath coming in shallow gasps that he could not control. Elena, he whispered. Who is she? Elena's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she held the child tighter. Her name is Sophia, Elena said. And she's your daughter. The truth. They sat in a 24-hour diner while the rain continued outside. Victor had dismissed his car and his advisors, something he never did. Now he sat across from Elena in a cracked vinyl booth, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold between his hands. Sophia had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, her small face finally peaceful. Victor could not stop looking at her. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elena stared at the table. I found out I was pregnant a week after I left. I wanted to tell you. I picked up the phone 100 times. But every time I saw those photographs, I saw what your world was. And I couldn't bring her into that. You had no right. I had every right. Elena cut him off, her eyes flashing with sudden fire. You are a killer, Victor. You destroy people for a living. Was I supposed to put my child in the middle of that? Was I supposed to let her grow up watching her father do terrible things? Victor opened his mouth to argue and then closed it, because she was right. For 5 years, Elena continued, her voice breaking, I raised her alone. I dropped out of medical school. I worked 3 jobs. I did everything I could to give her a good life. She looked out the window at the rain. But then she got sick. Victor's blood ran cold. What do you mean, sick? A heart condition. Congenital. She needed surgery. Elena wiped her eyes. The insurance didn't cover enough. I had already borrowed money from everyone I knew. And then, someone offered to help. Who? Elena hesitated. Elena. Who? A man named Gregor, she said quietly. He runs a lending operation in the East District. He gave me the money for Sophia's surgery. I thought I could pay him back. I thought I had time. Victor's hands tightened on the coffee cup. He knew Gregor, a small-time operator who ran loan sharking schemes that targeted desperate people. Victor had always considered him too insignificant to bother with, a bottom feeder picking scraps from the city's poor. Now that bottom feeder had touched his family. How much do you owe? Victor asked. 30,000. plus interest. Elena laughed bitterly. The interest keeps growing. I can't catch up. Tonight, his men came to our apartment. They said if I don't pay by the end of the month. She trailed off, holding Sophia closer. I took her and ran. I didn't know where else to go. For a long moment, Victor was silent. Then he reached across the table and gently touched his daughter's hair, the first time he had ever touched her. Sophia stirred slightly in her sleep, then settled again. Something shifted inside Victor. Something that had been frozen for a very long time. The debt is gone, he said quietly. You will not run anymore. Elena looked at him with uncertainty. Victor, I don't want your help. I don't want Sophia in your world. She is already in my world, Victor replied. She has been since the day she was born with my eyes. He met Elena's gaze steadily. I am not asking to be her father. I have not earned that. But I will protect her. I will protect both of you. This is not negotiable. Elena stared at him for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. The change. 3 weeks passed. Victor moved Elena and Sophia into a safe apartment in a quiet neighborhood far from his usual territory. He paid off Gregor's debt with a single phone call, along with a warning that if anyone from Gregor's organization ever came near his family again, Gregor would learn why they called Victor the Ghost. The debt disappeared. Gregor's men never returned. But Victor did. At first, he came only to check on their safety. He would stand outside the apartment building, watching the windows, making sure no threats approached. He told himself this was enough. He told himself that he was not trying to be a father, only a protector. But then Elena invited him inside. The first time Victor sat in their small living room, he did not know what to do with his hands. He was a man who had faced death without flinching, who had negotiated with the most dangerous criminals in the country, who could silence a room with a single look. But sitting across from his 5-year-old daughter, he felt more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Sophia did not know who he was. Elena had told her only that Victor was an old friend. The little girl studied him with those gray eyes, his eyes, and said, "You look sad." Victor blinked. "Do I?" "Yes." Sophia tilted her head. "Are you lonely?" The question hit Victor harder than any bullet ever had. "Sometimes," he admitted. Sophia slid off her chair and walked over to him. She reached up and patted his hand gently, the way a child comforts a hurt animal. "You don't have to be lonely," she said seriously. "You can be our friend." In that moment, Victor Morozov, the ghost, the killer, the most feared man in the city, felt tears threatening to fall for the first time in 25 years. He blinked them back, but something inside him had broken open, and he did not know how to close it again. The weeks became months. Victor began visiting regularly. He brought gifts, toys for Sophia, groceries for Elena, anything they needed. He watched Sophia draw pictures with crayons. He listened to her tell stories about her imaginary friends. He sat with her while she watched cartoons, though he understood nothing about them. Slowly, carefully, he began to learn how to smile again. Elena watched this transformation with guarded hope. She did not trust Victor completely. She could not, knowing what he was. But she saw the way he looked at Sophia, and she recognized something she had not seen in 7 years. The good man she had once believed in was still there. He was just learning how to exist again. But empires do not wait for their kings to find redemption. The betrayal. Victor's right-hand man was named Alexei. They had worked together for 15 years. Alexei had been with Victor since the early days, rising through the ranks by his boss's side, earning trust through loyalty and efficiency. Victor had always believed that if there was one person in his organization who would never betray him, it was Alexei. He was wrong. Alexei had watched Victor's behavior change over the past few months with growing concern. The boss who had once been cold and focused was now distracted, leaving meetings early, taking unexplained phone calls, disappearing for hours without explanation. When Alexei discovered the truth, the woman, the child, the secret life Victor was building, he did not feel happy for his boss. He felt fear. In their world, weakness was death. A man with something to lose was a man who could be controlled. And if Victor could be controlled, then the empire could be taken. Alexei made his choice. He contacted Victor's oldest rival, a man named Yuri Petrov, who had been waiting years for an opportunity to strike. Alexei told Petrov everything. The apartment, the woman, the child, the weakness. If you take the girl, Alexei said, Victor will do anything to get her back. He will give up territory. He will give up power. He might even give up his life. Petrov smiled. Then we take the girl. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena had taken Sophia to a nearby park, a routine they had developed over the past few months. 2 of Victor's men were supposed to be watching from a distance, keeping them safe without making Elena feel like a prisoner. But when the van appeared, those 2 men were nowhere to be found. Later, Victor would learn that Alexei had reassigned them at the last moment. Later, he would understand the full depth of the betrayal. But in that moment, all he knew was the phone call. Elena's voice, screaming. Then silence. Then a man's voice, calm, cold, familiar. Victor, it's Yuri. I have something of yours. Victor's heart turned to ice. If you hurt them, I don't want to hurt anyone, Yuri said smoothly. I want to make a deal. Your territory on the east side, your shipping routes, your seat at the council, all of it signed over to me. In exchange, you get your woman and your daughter back. Alive. How do I know they're alive now? There was a rustling sound. Then Sophia's voice, small and frightened. Mama? Where's Mama? Something broke inside Victor. I want her back, he said, his voice barely recognizable. Tell me where. The choice. The exchange was set for midnight at an abandoned factory on the edge of the city. Victor's advisors, the ones who remained loyal, begged him not to go. They said it was a trap. They said Yuri would kill him anyway. They said he should bring an army, surround the building, take what was his by force. But Victor shook his head. If I bring men, they will kill Sophia before I get through the door, he said quietly. If I show strength, they will show cruelty. Then what will you do? One advisor asked. Victor looked out the window at the city he had ruled for so long. I will show them something they have never seen from me, he said. Surrender. He arrived at the factory alone. No guards, no weapons, just a man in an expensive coat walking through the rain toward an open door. Inside, Yuri was waiting with a dozen armed men. In the corner, Elena sat tied to a chair, her face bruised but her eyes defiant. Beside her, Sophia was held by one of Yuri's men, a frightened child who did not understand why bad men had taken her away from the park. When Victor walked in, Sophia's eyes went wide. It's you, she whispered. The sad man. Victor's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He walked forward until he stood in the center of the room, surrounded by guns, completely vulnerable. I'm here, he said to Yuri. You want my empire? Take it. The territory, the routes, the council seat. I'll sign whatever you want. He met Yuri's eyes with absolute calm. But you let them go first. Now. Yuri laughed. You think I'm stupid? You sign first. Then they go. No. Victor shook his head slowly. You misunderstand. I am not negotiating. I am begging. He spread his hands, showing he was unarmed. This is not the ghost. This is a father who is asking you, please, to let his daughter go. The room went silent. Yuri stared at Victor with something approaching shock. In 15 years of rivalry, he had never seen this man show vulnerability. Not once. What trick is this? Yuri demanded. No trick. Victor's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. I have spent my entire life taking things from people. Territory, money, lives. Tonight, I am offering everything I have taken. Everything I have built. In exchange for one thing only. He looked at Sophia. Her. Yuri hesitated. This was not the man he had expected to face. And in that hesitation, something shifted. The resolution. In the end, the exchange was made. Victor signed papers transferring his holdings to Yuri. He surrendered his seat on the council. He gave away everything he had spent 20 years building, all of it gone in one night. In return, Elena and Sophia walked out of that factory alive. Victor watched them go, feeling the weight of his empire lift from his shoulders. He did not feel loss. He felt freedom. But his story was not over yet. As he turned to leave, Alexei stepped forward, the traitor, standing beside Yuri with a satisfied smile. You're a fool, Alexei said. You gave up everything for a woman and a child. What kind of man does that? Victor looked at his former friend for a long moment. The kind of man I should have been a long time ago, he said quietly. Then he walked out into the rain. 2 years later, the house was small, but it was enough. It sat on a quiet street in a town far from the city, a place where no one knew the name Victor Morozov, where no one whispered about the ghost. Here, he was just a man named Victor who worked at the local hardware store, who mowed his lawn on Saturdays, who helped his neighbors carry groceries. Here, he was no one important. And that was exactly what he wanted. Elena stood at the kitchen window watching the backyard. Outside, Victor was pushing Sophia on a swing, her laughter echoing through the warm summer air. The little girl was 7 now, healthy and strong. Her heart condition just a distant memory. She still had her father's gray eyes. But now, when she looked at him, she knew who he was. Not the ghost. Not the killer, just Dad. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Victor looked up and saw her watching. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. It was an expression she had never seen on him before they came to this quiet place. He had changed. Not overnight. Not easily. There were still dark nights when he woke from nightmares. There were still moments when the old coldness crept back into his eyes. But every day he fought to be better. Every day he earned the family he had been given. And every day, Sophia ran to greet him when he came home from work, throwing her arms around his neck and saying, I love you, Daddy. Those 3 words healed something in Victor that nothing else ever could. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Victor and Elena sat on the porch watching the stars. Do you miss it? Elena asked quietly. The power? The empire? Victor considered the question for a long moment. I miss nothing, he said finally. For 30 years, I believed that strength meant taking, that power meant destroying, that being feared was the same as being alive. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. I was always wrong. He reached over and took her hand. You asked me once if I could change, he said. I told you I couldn't. That was a lie. He looked at the window where Sophia's night light glowed softly. She changed me. You changed me. Love changed me. Elena squeezed his hand. That good man I always believed in, she whispered. I knew he was in there. Victor smiled. A small, quiet smile. He agreed. He just needed someone to show him the way out. And there, on that quiet porch, beneath a sky full of stars, a monster found his redemption. Not through violence, not through power, but through the simple, impossible miracle of being loved. Some men are born into darkness. Some men choose it. And some men, the lucky ones, find a light strong enough to lead them home.